Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We are so excited to have you join us today. Today is a very special day for the Rotary Club. As the president explained, we have been working on the inclusive education projects for the past 2 years. We've had 2 consecutive successful inclusive education summits. These were global summits, and therefore, through those summits last year, especially the importance of the universal design for learning came up, and we went on a mission as a club to look for experts in this particular area of education, if I may call it that. There's so many ways to explain it, but let me just call it that. And that is where we were introduced to Katie Novak by one of our friends of Rotary, Mr. Daniel Roda from the US. And of course, as we were building our rapport, we were trying to find out what Katie's work is, what has she been doing. And I remember the first session we had together, I told her, my research tells me that people call you the queen of UDA. And I said, to my utter surprise and pleasant surprise, of course, I said, my own home country, Kenya, loves you. Everyone was talking about you. And I said, you know what? She is the right person to come and, first of all, debunk what UDL is. We need to demystify it. We need to understand. We need to unpack UDL. And as we were now introduced to her, we went through her profile. We came to know she's an internationally recognized expert in inclusive education, of course, UDL, and the multi-tiered system of supports, which is the MTSS. She has almost 25 years of experience as a teacher, as young as she looks. That means she started early. She's a curriculum coordinator, and she is also an assistant superintendent. She is also an instructor at the University of Pennsylvania, an author of 16 books with over 300,000 copies sold worldwide. So as you can see, this is somebody who just doesn't teach UDL, she lives it, she breathes it, and that is what she gives to the world, her UDL perspective. And what I love about her is that she is known for creating engaging professional development and practical tools that help educators like us to improve the student outcomes. We have always, in the traditional method, we have always been teacher-centered. And now the world, including, of course, Kenya, we're talking about us being student, learner-centered. And how do we transform from the teacher-centered to the learner-centered? That's exactly what UDL is for us in terms of the tools and the pedagogy and all that. So her work combines research, and I'm not just saying research in America. She's doing global research right now. I'm sure she's going to share that experience with us. Her real-world experience, her passion for meaningful educational change. And what I love about her, we always say teachers, the quality of a teacher's method is always measured by students about how humorous she is, how interesting she'll make a session. Trust me, we've been in sessions with her. We said it will be a half-an-hour meeting. We end up having 2 hours, and we're still not tired, but it's just that time runs out and we just have to move on to other things. But she is a lot of fun. And what I love about her is that she makes UDL practical for people like us who do not fully understand UDL. I know I've not done enough justice to her introduction, but I'm sure whatever I have said, you will all believe me at the end of her session. So Katie, thank you so much for accepting our invitation, and welcome aboard. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I am so happy to be here. That was such a beautiful introduction, Sonia. My heart is full, and I'm going to share a little bit today about a framework that helps all educators, regardless of where you teach or who you teach, to design learning that is flexible enough to meet the needs of the amazingly beautiful, diverse student body who we serve. Now, I want you to have options and choices today in this presentation. So if it is helpful for you, if you look at the chat, I've given you a link to this presentation, so you will have a copy of it. And Ken, you're welcome to send that out after. And certainly if it is better for you to follow along on the presentation, you can click on that link. Another option is to turn on the closed captions on this presentation so that you can follow along. So do whatever is best for you. Now, as we dive in, universal design for learning is simply how do we design learning so it works for everyone? That's what universal really means. And when we're going to serve a diverse group of students, we can predict that there are going to be students who have disabilities. We can predict that there's going to be students who are multilingual. We can predict there's going to be students who don't have background information in what we are teaching. And if we know that, we have to design for it. So we have 3 goals in this webinar today. The first is, after you leave this webinar, I want you to understand what we mean by universal design for learning. And we're going to talk about 3 core tenets or 3 foundational beliefs that build the UDL framework. The next is we're going to be talking about how universal design for learning is similar but different from differentiated instruction. And we're going to need both of those if we want to meet the needs of all students. And then you're also going to start thinking about what are some current barriers in your school, in your system, maybe in your own classroom that are preventing all students from learning. Because if we can identify barriers, we can eliminate those barriers through design. So knowing that the next hour is going to be focused on what is universal design for learning and how do we use it to eliminate barriers, and what is the relationship between universal design for learning and differentiated instruction, I want you to take a moment and think about, what do you already know about universal design for learning? Or maybe, what is a concern that you have about universal design for learning, or a curiosity or a question? So you have one option to tell me what you know about UDL or what you're wondering about UDL. The other option is, what would make this hour very worth your time? So when you leave, you felt like this was an hour that was well spent. Now, we're going to talk a lot about firm goals and flexible means today. So I want to be really flexible with you. So first of all, you can choose which question you want to answer, and you can choose how you want to answer that question. So some of you may want to use the chat to share your answer to the question, or maybe you want to ask me a question. But if you are watching this with a colleague or a family member, if you're not by yourself, maybe you'd prefer to have a conversation about what you're learning. Or maybe you are someone who likes to take notes. I love having a notebook next to my desk, and I love taking notes. So maybe you want to take notes, or maybe you just need a little bit of time to reflect and process. Now, I'm going to put on a timer for 2 minutes for you to choose one of these questions to answer, either in the chat, in a conversation, or just to think about it. And I'm going to play music for this 2 minutes. Now, you don't have to listen to music. You can mute your computer. So all you have to do is turn off the volume on your computer, and then you don't have to listen to the music. But it may be great for some of you if it's on in the background. Okay, so just to kind of step back here, you're going to have a choice of which question you want to answer, how you want to answer it, and you can decide to either listen to the music or you can just turn off the volume on your computer. And when I switch to the next slide, I will be talking again, so you can turn the volume back on, okay? So I'm gonna start the 2-minute timer. I'm going to play a little bit of music, and feel free to answer this in whatever way works best for you. Okay, everyone. Think about how many options, how many choices you have had already. Because a universally designed class is one where we design in a really flexible way so all students can choose what works best for them so that they have pathways to be successful. Now, in the chat, somebody wrote a great question and said, my curiosity is really about how we're able to meet the needs of a very large number of students when we don't have a lot of resources yet. So I did put an amazing blog that a colleague of mine wrote about her work with Universal Design for Learning in Sierra Leone, and that might be a really good blog to either read or listen to. We have an audio recording of it for 5 minutes. Feel free to translate it, because certainly it's not so much about the resources or about the technology, but it's about the flexibility and how we work with our learners to essentially say, okay, if this is what we need to do, what are all the different ways that we may be able to do it? So I'm going to share with you an analogy that hopefully helps make sense of what we mean by universal design for learning. And then in the second part of the webinar, I'm going to show you what it would look like in my classroom. I am was a middle years and high school English teacher. So I taught English language arts to students between the ages of about 13 years old to 18 years old. And so we're going to talk about how we can design with firm goals and flexible means, even when you have very large classes and even when you don't have a lot of resources, because this is about flexibility and creativity and empathy. And so let's dive in. I want you to imagine that all of us are going on a camping trip. Okay, imagine the Rotary Club is going to send us all on a magical camping trip. Now, some of you might say, I do not want to go camping. I do not like camping, or I have never gone camping. And that's okay, because we know that some of our students may never have a deep love or passion for every subject matter, but it really is important that we provide them with access to different experiences in ways that are accessible and engaging for them. So I want you just to imagine that somehow you have gotten yourself onto this camping trip. And we're gonna look at the curriculum goal for this camping trip, okay? The goal is that everyone here is going to enjoy a delicious meal by the campfire, and then you're gonna have a very, very delicious, refreshing drink, and you're going to do an activity outdoors. Now, I want you to lock into your mind what this means for you. You're going to go back to your come from place. You're going to think about your dietary needs, and you're going to think about, if you had to go on this camping trip, what is going to be that delicious meal, that refreshing drink, and that activity? And so when we're thinking about this work, I am going back into my head and I'm saying, oh, I'm just picturing my family growing up, and I'm thinking about what I like to do outside, and you're all thinking about that as well. Now, I know for sure that if I was flexible, if we worked together, we could make this work for all of us. However, I've decided that I'm in charge and I'm going to make all the decisions for us. Now, that's being a little bit naughty, but this is what I did as a classroom teacher, and I didn't even realize that I was being naughty. So I just want you to take a minute, and if you're willing, you don't have to, 1 minute here, I want you to share the food that you are hoping to eat while you are at the campground, and come back to your come from place, and you can put it in any language. Feel free to share a link to the recipe if you'd like. 1 minute, again, I'm gonna play some country music. This is my mom and dad's favorite artist. His name is John Denver, and he has a song, Thank God I'm a Country Boy. So in the chat, if you're willing, what is a food or drink that you love and would love to eat on a camping trip? Ready, go. Okay, well, I am very, very sorry that all of you saw a path where you would be successful because I already made the decision for you. Now, I want you to imagine this is how we're going to do the camping trip. We are all going to eat hot dogs. Now, you might ask, what is in a hot dog? It is a decidedly American food. And the answer is we don't know. We don't know what is in the hot dog, right? It's some kind of animal byproduct, and we're gonna char it over the fire. And then we're all gonna drink beer, and then we're all gonna swim across one of those deep, dark lakes. Things are gonna touch your legs. You can't see the bottom. It's going to be magical. Now, there is nothing wrong with these options. However, if they are the only options, I am sure that many of you will not be able to meet the goal of eating, drinking, and doing an outdoor activity. So you can let me know in the chat really quickly if you are excited about this camping trip or if that's not going to work for you. So you can just give me an emoji, thumbs up, I am in. This sounds amazing, Katie. You are the greatest camp director of all time. Or you might say, nope, sorry, I'm not doing it. Now, why is this not going to work for everybody? We know, we can predict there are so many people in this world who have a plant-based diet. They do not eat meat. There are so many people who are sober and do not drink alcohol. And there are many people who do not know how to swim. And so this is excluding so many people by design. And remember at the beginning, I told you, we know we have students who have disabilities, who have support needs, who are multilingual. And yet we design in a way that is one size fits all. And so there again is nothing wrong with this. This might be high quality for some, but it's not inclusive. And universal design for learning is about how do we design in a way that is inclusive. And so when I'm looking at a goal that says enjoy a meal, when I'm looking at a goal that says have a drink or complete an activity, I, as the designer, have made a decision about what your pathway is going to be. Now, in addition to the fact that I will exclude all vegetarians or people with a plant-based diet, anyone sober, or anyone who doesn't know how to swim, I'm also excluding a lot of other people just because you don't want to do it that way. So there are some of you who maybe do eat meat and maybe do drink alcohol and know how to swim, and you say, no, I'm not doing it that way. And this is where we're at right now with so many students, is when we don't design with flexibility, when we don't provide learners with choices, many of them simply don't have access. And then others, even though they might be able to access it, they say, no, I don't want to do it. This is not relevant. This is not worth my effort. I'm not going to do it that way. Either way, they are excluded. Now, I told you I was starting with a silly camping analogy, but I want to take this same analogy and talk about what I and many teachers do in the classroom. Is we start off with a goal like we want all of our students to understand how characters interact in a text to drive the plot forward. Okay, that's what we want to make sure that everybody knows. Every student should understand how when characters meet each other, they change each other's lives in some way. Every interaction with another human has the potential to change our path, to create joy, or potentially to create conflict. And if I want my students to understand that, there are so many ways that students can learn about characterization. There's so many ways they can share their learning about characterization. But just as in the camping analogy, I often made the decisions for them. And I would say, you're going to learn about characterization by reading a hard copy of this book. And then I would hand out a hard copy of a book, printed text. Maybe it's a worksheet, maybe it is an actual book. And I said, here's the book. Read and learn about characterization. And then you have to write me an essay. And it has to be in blue or black ink. It has to be on lined paper. I would say things like that. And then I would say, and it has to be done in 2 class periods. Otherwise, you're going to lose points. Now, I loved teaching. I loved kids. This was not about me trying to exclude students, but this design did exclude so many students. It excluded so many students who were multilingual and weren't reading in English, who had visual impairment, who were not decoding at grade level. So when I handed out the text, they said, I can't read this yet. I can't read this like this. And now they're excluded. Just like in the chat, someone said, oh, wait, if you only have alcohol, I can't drink. If you only have printed text, some kids won't learn because they don't have that skill set yet. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't actively teach reading, but if the goal is characterization, I need to provide options for how they access that text. Interestingly, this is not a writing standard. This is a reading comprehension goal. There is nothing in this goal that says students have to produce writing. So they could learn about characterization and then they could share it with me in lots of different ways. And there's also nothing in this goal that says it has to be done in exactly 120 minutes. And so how can I be more flexible when I go back to camping? Is I simply have to say, what is the firm goal? And then how do I create more flexible means? So I say, everyone, we're going to have a meal by the campfire. We're going to have a drink, and then we're going to do an activity. Now, I just want to talk to you first about the purpose of this trip and how we're going to be gathering together. And I want to think about all of the ingredients we have already. And I want to think about how we could have options and choices. So for example, I have hot dogs and I also have some vegetables that we could grill, but I'm wondering if anyone else wants. I will bring roasted chicken, and someone else says, I'm going to bring croissants and beef pies. And someone else says, I am going to bring some pizza, right? We are co-creating this based on available ingredients. And then we say the same thing. I'm going to have beer. I'm going to have water. And someone says, I'll bring lemonade. Or, oh, I'll make sure I bring natural fruit juice. I have these beautiful trees in my backyard. And because the goal isn't swimming, some of you can just sit and paint, or maybe go for a walk, or maybe you want to go out in a canoe, or maybe you do want to just get your feet wet. But ultimately, what really is the goal? And so in this scenario, I could say to students, this is a really beautiful piece of writing. And so I want you to decide, how do you want to access this writing? Do you want a hard copy of it? Or do you want to work with me or a friend in a small group and we can read it out loud? Or if you do have available digital technology, maybe you could say there's also a digital version that is going to play it out loud so you can listen to it. But let's work together and think about what is the best way that we can access this small part of text so you understand how these characters met and then they change each other, they move forward. And how do you want to share what you've learned with me? Do you want to write it down? Do you want to maybe share it by making a short presentation? Would it work for you to maybe draw a picture, right? You can draw it on the back of cardboard, you can sketch it out on a piece of paper and then explain, like, how do the characters after meeting each other change? And I was thinking about giving you 2 class periods, but I'm going to check in periodically to see if that's enough time, because I want to make sure you're really, really moving forward. And so this concept of firm goals and flexible means is all about autonomy. It's all about agency. It's saying the non-negotiable is that you're all going to learn about characters. So I'm going to explain a little bit first, and then you decide what's the best way for you to access this. And so what we're really doing is we're not only providing choices, is we're thinking about the barriers, and then we're going to eliminate those barriers through design. So when I started with the camping analogy, I said, I know some people don't eat meat. I need to make sure I eliminate that barrier and have plant-based options for vegetarians. I know some people don't drink alcohol. I have many friends who do not drink alcohol. I know I need a beverage that doesn't have alcohol in it. I know that some people don't swim. I need other activities, or I need floaties or something like that if I want people to swim. Now, here is the magic, is so many people think universal design for learning is just about choice. The choice doesn't mean anything if you haven't eliminated the barrier. So for my non-drinking friends, if they come to my house and I say, would you like a drink? And they go, sure, I would love a drink. And I said, here's a beer. And they say, I don't drink alcohol. And I say, oh, no problem. Do you want your beer in a can, in a bottle, or in a glass? Technically, I have given you 3 options, but if you cannot drink beer or will not drink beer, that does nothing for you. So it's really about, is there another way to do this to eliminate the barrier? Now, this is one of my favorite documents because it's so simple. It's called the Would You Rather ebook. And it uses many, many very common, high quality instructional strategies that doesn't work for everyone. That's it. Okay. That hot dog could be a high quality sausage. It doesn't work for vegetarians. That book can be one of the greatest texts of all time. It could be culturally responsive. Not all kids can decode grade level text. And so if we know what the real goal is, we think about who can we predict will be excluded. And so this was a resource that I created with teachers. And if you scroll down to page 3, or you can access it after, I promise you that just with these small shifts, you will have more students who are included. You have more students who feel like they belong. You'll have more students who can access learning in a way that works for them. And so many traditional practices, for example, many people will tell students that they all have to sit in desks, or they all have to sit crisscross applesauce on the floor. I know that there are many students whom have a lot of sensory needs and might have attention deficit disorder. Myself, I have attention deficit disorder. I have a daughter with attention deficit disorder. If you tried to get me seated quietly for a long time, I will be a problem. I will start touching other people. I'll start wriggling around. Just the option for me to stand, to move around, if I can do it in a way that doesn't disrupt other people, is a great way to get me to focus. This idea of saying we all have to read the same text. Sometimes it's important for us to have a shared reading experience, so we have to think about the format of that text. Can it be digital so that we can translate it? Can they work in a small group where someone reads it out loud? Can they choose to have a hard copy of it? Right? And we just think about logistically, what can we provide based on the ingredients we have already? And so let's say that you don't have technology. You can't provide students with an option to access the text on a computer, but you can eliminate the decoding barrier by giving students an option to work with a friend who can read it out loud. So it's all about what really is the goal, and is there another way to do this? And when we step back and we say to students, this is the firm goal, this is what we're all doing, let's talk about a couple different ways we could do this. Invite the students into the design. Say, is there another way we could do this? Now, there's one very important thing, is that when we're being flexible, we're trying to provide choices. The choices have to eliminate the barrier, and the choices have to lead to the same firm goal. So if the goal is writing, we want all students to produce writing. And I'm going to talk about the writing process in the next part of this webinar, because we can universally design writing when writing is actually the goal. But if writing is not the goal, we could say, is there another way for students to explain what they learned about the revolution in this country? Is there another way to compare and contrast, or share a compare and contrast on this animal and this animal? Is there a way that students could share the effects of human impact on the water near us, and start thinking about the options and saying to students, how do you want to do this? Students are so creative and they can be such great problem solvers. But the key is you don't want to provide too many choices, because there's something called the paradox of choice. And that means that too many choices actually creates barriers because people get very overwhelmed. So when someone says, how much choice is too much choice? What we know based on research is anything over 6 is too many. Ideally, it's 2 to 4. So knowing that, let's reflect in 2 to 4 ways. So the question here is, what connection can you make between the camping analogy, which I meant to be a little bit silly, but it shows that it doesn't matter how hard we're trying or how much we work or how high quality something is. If it doesn't work for everyone, it is not universally designed. And so how does this relate to your work as an educator, your work as an advocate? I saw that there's some parents here. Just thinking about how we can shift from one size fits all to firm goals, flexible means. Now, you have a couple of options here. First of all, I want to remind you, if you're feeling antsy, to get up and stretch if you're able. This is a great time to move around, roll your shoulders for 2 minutes. Maybe you're with a colleague and you can have a discussion. If you want to access the Would You Rather ebook, it's a good time just to do a quick scroll to see if that is something that you are interested in sharing. And again, a quick reminder that there is going to be music, and if that is distracting to you in any way, I want you to please mute your computer. Just make it less loud, or make it louder if you really want to get your dance party on here. But I just know that if I don't play music, the silence is a little bit awkward for some people. And if I do play music, sometimes it's distracting. So a great example here is firm goals, flexible means. Now, in my classroom, or in any classroom that I work in the world, I build in reflection alerts about every 10 minutes, just like this. And I will pause and I will say, how do you want to reflect? Do you want to have a conversation? Do you want to use a device to share? Do you want to draw a quick picture? Do you need a brain break? Because reflection does not mean discussion. Reflection doesn't mean writing. If the goal is reflection, there's lots of different ways we can reflect. So 2 minutes here, decide how you want to answer the question to understand big picture. And as promised, the next piece is going to take this analogy and it's going to bring it into a lesson in my English class. Here we go. Okay. So again, we're going to dive into the examples. And there's a great, brilliant reminder in the chat of just, when you have frameworks that kind of the foundation of that framework was developed in the global north, right? The interpretation of it is definitely going to be different everywhere around the world. And what I love about this framework in particular is simply that it's not saying what the flexibility should be. It's not saying what the standard should be. It's saying that, like, if your local community has decided this is what all students have to know and do, then the local community has this amazing opportunity to come together and say, okay, and given what we have for infrastructure, given what we have for local community supports, right? What are some other ways that we can do this? And again, there's always going to be some recognition of just kind of the local cultural norms in that. And so it's not, I am in no way, shape, or form arguing that this is what the flexibility needs to look like. But in working with schools all over the world, thinking differently about what flexibility could look like here, because we know that education is a human right. The United Nations has said that all people, including those with really significant disabilities, should have access to local, high quality public education. And so again, really going back in and realizing that systems have barriers, absolutely, all over the world, and the barriers are different. And there's places that are so much better resourced than others. And so it's really kind of stepping back and it's saying, given our core values and, given our local skill set and given these resources, right? If we believe truly that all kids deserve access to learning about these things, how do we design them more flexibly so that we can give learners the choice to say, is it better for you to do it this way? Or is it better for you to do it this way? So the 3 core tenets of universal design for learning, first is the idea that variability is the rule and not the exception. Now, there's two types of variability. There's interpersonal variability, I just put that in the chat, and that's we are very different from each other. Each of us is incredibly unique, and all of us have our own life experiences, and we are shaped by our identity and the roads that we have taken, and that is interpersonal variability. However, what is even more interesting is there is also something called intrapersonal variability, which is that we are dynamic and our needs are always changing. And so traditional education tried to figure out what every kid needed so that they could provide what kids needed directly to them. The issue is that kids' needs, adult needs, are changing. And what I am capable of on my best day is very, very different than what I'm capable of on a really challenging day, because so many of our needs are based on context. And so if you were to say to me, do you want to read a hard copy of a text, a printed copy of a text or a book, or do you want it read aloud to you? It's very much going to depend on the day. So you want to be able to say to me, the goal here is that you're able to comprehend this text. So which of these works best for you today? And I would want to know, well, do I have background information on this? Is there a lot of competing noise in the room? Am I in a good mood or am I in a bad mood? Because if I'm not in a very good mood, I might not want to work with other people. But this is the idea of variability, is that what we are is we're beautifully unique and we're dynamic. And so since we know that, there is no way that we'll ever definitely know what someone needs without their consent. And there is no more important life skill than consent. And all learners, regardless of their support needs, are able to communicate consent, yes, no, this, not this, even if it's not in a traditional verbal sense. Because certainly you can tell when someone is upset about something just through observation, regardless of their ability to communicate in a more traditional way. And so what we say is universal design for learning is not necessarily how do I plan for the students who are in front of me right now, but how do I design this so any student who comes in could have access. So it's much bigger than what's just happening in a classroom. It's saying based on what I know about humans and based on what I can predict are barriers, what are the barriers that I need to be aware of so I can eliminate them. And I'm going to eliminate them through firm goals, and that's always locally defined. What is it that students have to know and do? And then flexible means, so that I can say to learners, this is what we're doing today and this is why we're doing it. Here are the options that are appropriate. Do you want to work alone or do you want to work together? Do you want to be standing while you're doing it or do you want to be sitting? Does it make more sense for you to sit and share this book and read it quietly, or does it make sense for one of you to read it out loud, or for me to read it out loud for anyone who wants to read it out loud? And so you're always just thinking about these three things. One, we embrace human variability, of which disability is a beautiful part of identity and something that we absolutely can predict. Second, knowing that we have to design with firm goals and flexible means. And because of intrapersonal variability, we want to say to learners, okay, these are your options. Which of these do you feel like works best for you? And some students are going to communicate in very, very different ways than a simple, well, that's the path I choose because. Maybe using communication cards like yes or no. Maybe there are, augmentative communication where there's like a yes button, a no button, maybe it's eye contact, but all of those are ways to communicate consent. Now, I want to share with you what it would look like as an example, because a very traditional way to teach all over the world is simply, here is a text. Now think of text as being much bigger than this. It could be data, it could be video, it could be a book, it could be a map or a data set in math. But essentially, like, here is the text. And we expect students to comprehend that text. And in some cases, they have to write in response to that text. Okay, it's very, very traditional. And so we know all around the world, there is a focus on literacy, reading comprehension, and then producing writing. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about what this looked like with technology, and then I'm going to pull the tech tools out and show you what it would look like if you did not have technology. Because again, you can only provide flexibility with tools and ingredients that you currently have. So the traditional lesson would have been just handing out maybe a printed copy, having students share, read this. It happens to be a transcript of a speech where a man who has depression, he has clinical depression, is making fun of his depression because he's trying to say that humans all over the world experience joy, experience trauma, experience heartbreak. And in some cultures, in some places, we're very secretive about that for very different reasons. And he's kind of trying to make fun of his depression, saying, I want people to feel like they can talk about it more. And so students have to either work alone or work together to try to figure out where is he making jokes about his depression, and then do they think that his jokes are funny or not funny, inappropriate, mean. Every answer is correct. So we have to do a lot of work with psychological safety and let kids know whatever you think, that is your truth. And when we think about this work, we need to say, all right, so if the goal is access the text and then make your thinking visible in some way or interactive in some way so that you are ultimately able to produce something that is written, where is the flexibility in that? And so the first thing I think about is whenever there is something printed, it can either be printed, or if you have digital technology, even a single device, it can be pulled up so it can be read aloud digitally. But also, as long as there is somebody that has strong oral fluency, an adult, a volunteer, a classmate, they can read it out loud. So I would provide choices right from the beginning. Do you want to work by yourself today? Do you want to work in a small group with 1 or 2 people today? Or do you want to work with me in a group, right? Those are options that we can provide. Then I can provide, do you want it in hard copy? Do you want it digitally? If it is available, if it is not, it's do you want it in hard copy or do you want to read it loud to you? And again, in many classrooms, I would decide for all of the students. I would say, you're all going to read it silently, everyone be quiet, or I'm going to read it out loud. But that doesn't recognize just inter and interpersonal variability. So the next step is, while you're reading, whether you're reading alone or whether you're reading with partners, whether you're laying on your bellies or whether you're at a table, if that exists, right? Wherever you're standing, right? I want you to start thinking about where are the jokes. And you can either highlight them, or you can draw pictures of them, or you can decide you're going to stop and talk about it. And I can just walk around and kind of circulate and start getting a sense of, are they starting to see where he's making these jokes? And at any time, I might pull small groups who I feel like might be struggling to maybe guide them in a better way. But I'm saying there's lots of ways to access this text, and there's lots of ways to kind of share your thinking while you're going through this text. And then ultimately, we think about the writing process. Now, brainstorming can be lots of things. Brainstorming can be talking. Brainstorming can be making a list. Brainstorming can be reading an exemplar or asking questions. And so in my classroom, before students started an assignment, I would always say, I'm going to give you the directions really quickly. And then if you're ready to get started, you can get started. If you want to maybe take a couple of minutes and show me your notes, ask me some questions, that's fine too. But if you want to just talk to me or a classmate, any language of your home and heart is appropriate, just so that you're on the same page of what you're actually going to be doing. Okay, so again, firm goals and flexible means. And the last piece would be, now you're going to start kind of producing that writing. And so maybe it is writing a draft in the notebook. Again, if you're working together, maybe you have one that's a scribe. This idea of if there are devices, right? Maybe allowing students to type, or if students have assistive technology that's available. If it's not, it could be a scribe. It's looking at the available options, and whatever is necessary for some, we try to make available to everyone. I would allow students to listen to earbuds, or you could have one part of the classroom where you're playing music and you have the further part of the classroom for those students who want to get a little bit more space for more sensory sensitivity. But it's all about thinking about your own learning environment and making your own local version of would you rather, because ultimately it's about how can we be more flexible? How can we really elevate and celebrate student needs? And again, here's a quick blog written by a colleague who, was thinking about how do you universally design learning when tech is a barrier, when there's not access to tech. And there's some really great examples there that talks about the importance of firm goals and flexible means. Now, I promised you that one of our goals was going to be, what does this look like in terms of universal design for learning, which is all about firm goals and flexible means, and then this idea of differentiated instruction. So differentiated instruction is essentially this idea of when we have data that shows that some students already have something down and there are other students who need more support, they need different feedback from us. So every student has access to a universally designed lesson where we say, this is the goal, these are your options, this is what I can make available, which way would you rather do it? As they're working, we are looking at what they're doing. We're collecting data through observation, through student work, and we start to realize, based on this goal, there are some students who really have mastered this. Their next step is going to look a little bit different from students who are really still struggling. And so as a teacher, there were so many times that I would walk around the classroom and I'd start giving individual feedback. And I'd say the same thing 5 or 6 times. Differentiated instruction is simply realizing that this group of students needs this feedback for a next step, and I want to be able to pull them for a small group. Now, it's not about tracking or leveling. It's truly a 5 or 10 minute small group lesson saying, you know what? I noticed that as you were talking about whether the jokes were funny or inappropriate, you weren't citing any evidence. So since all of you are working on citing evidence, that's why I'm meeting with you for small group instruction, right? It's just about pulling small groups of students based on their need. So when we're looking at this together, it starts off with universal design for learning is firm goals before flexible means. Looking at your local goals, saying, what really is it that all learners have to know and do? And then we start thinking about variability in general. I know I'm going to have students who are not speaking English yet. I know I have students who are going to have executive function support needs. I know I might have students who are visually impaired. I know I'm going to have students who might have intellectual support needs. And so I start thinking about what are the barriers? And then how do I eliminate those barriers through design? As students are working, I am constantly present. I'm constantly looking to see what students are doing so that I can pull small groups of students to give them feedback, to make sure they're getting appropriate levels of challenge, appropriate next steps, appropriate, okay, this is how we're going to bring you up to speed. And so universal design for learning is something that we can do before the students are in front of us. But once the students are in front of us, people will say, but what if they're still struggling? What if they're not making great decisions? That's when I'm going to differentiate instruction and be responsive. And so there's a couple of tools that I am sharing with you here, and they are just no need to access them now, but they are available to you. One is when I'm walking into classrooms and I'm looking for universal design, what am I actually looking for? And so it always starts off with just really clear goals. We're just saying to kids, okay, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. What are you hoping to accomplish? What do you want to know about this? Right? Just like I started our presentation today. This is what we're doing. What do you hope to gain? What do you want to know? It's about belonging in community, right? We want to see kids that are making choices, that are working together. I used to say to my students, listen, you get to be exactly who you are, and you're going to be successful with me because we are going to figure out what you need. I'll work with your family. I'll work with your community. We're going to figure it out because everyone can learn when we get the conditions right. Because we all need different conditions, that has to look a little bit different. And we can do it a lot in routines. And so when we're thinking about, is a lesson universally designed, the flow chart on the right just has some questions where you start thinking about, like, is there a really clear goal? And if I don't have a really clear goal yet, focus on that, right? And then once I have a goal, am I thinking about learner variability? Am I thinking about, are there options for kids who may face this barrier? Are there options for students who may face this barrier? And again, over time, you're going to start to be more flexible. So again, today's goals, I want to start and end with them, and then there'll be one final takeaway before I'll hand it back to the team at the Rotary. The first is to understand the 3 core tenets. We embrace variability, we design with firm goals and flexible means, and we value learner agency. We value students knowing who they are, recognizing their strengths, consenting to a pathway that works for them as a learner. Number 2, universal design for learning is really about how do we create a flexible design with students, not just for students, and then how can we be responsive as teachers to target feedback and instruction based on student growth. And then lastly, we know the common barriers that students who have disabilities bring forward in terms of self-regulation challenges, in terms of executive function, in terms of maybe lagging skills when it comes to reading comprehension. And so we have to be flexible in the design of those things. So hopefully this was a brief introduction. The thing that I want to leave you with is just after learning today, complete the following sentence stem, and you can do that in the chat. You can do it by just writing a quick note if you have something nearby, and or just take a moment to process and reflect. But again, there is no right way, there is no wrong way. It's simply saying, what is it that all students have to know and do? And if we value education as liberation, if we value education as a human right, we have to think about, is there another way we could do this? And we don't have to have all the ideas if we're willing to listen to the ideas of our kids and our families and our colleagues. Because again, it's not that one teacher has to figure this out. It doesn't have to mean that I provide all the options for camping, but I say, let's get together and think about what we have collectively and how we can maybe make this work better for all of us. So it has been my pleasure. I'll put on 1 minute for you to finish the Today I Learned. And then Ken, if you have any final words, that's all you.
Thank you so much, Katie. I mean, the feedback tells us all. It tells us how wonderful this session has been for everyone. You've definitely unpacked UDL for us and demystified it for most of us. So I can see you've been answering most of the questions, but I think I can see our very own Rotary member, Mr. Mark Student, and he would like to ask you a question. Mark, please go ahead. Ken, could you kindly, or Katie, kindly take down your presentation, my dear? Thank you. Mark, the floor is yours.
Okay. Along with Dyslexia Scotland, I do some teacher training courses in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, and India, etc. And some of the schools come back and say that they've got, I find it mind-blowing, 580 kids can be in one classroom to one teacher. Mm-hmm. We're using the UFly training manual. I'm also board director of the LDA in America, and they kind of recognise it, and along with Dyslexia Scotland recognise it. But obviously what you're doing would add to it. But I don't know how one teacher would be able to implement. I mean, I've got the same problem with trying to train the teachers when you've got such a vast number of kids in one classroom. And I'm personally neurodiverse, so that's kind of my main focus. But I believe every child should be able to attend school, and every child should be able to leave school being able to read and write. That's my goal. And then you try and teach them life skills so they can earn money. Mm-hmm. We're talking about areas of extreme poverty.
I am also neurodivergent, and so sending love to all of you. What I would say is the fact that educators are serving so many students makes it even more imperative that we provide this flexibility, because it is impossible for me to give every student what they need. right? Like, when you're talking about a class of 25, 30, technically you could get around and talk to every single learner, but this collectivism of allowing students to work together to support each other, I think is even more important. And I think the key here is the routines that you build. So there are times that I'll present to 1,000 people. So I have a class technically of 1,000 for a day. And it's not so much me trying to figure out what everybody needs. It's I can guess, I can predict what people are going to need. So I know that some people are going to need frequent breaks. I know that some people are going to need to move around. I know that many people speak different languages. I know some people are going to bring the technology with them and some will not, right? And so in some ways, it's just thinking about knowing what I know about just humans in general. What are options that I can provide? And if I can provide options that allow people to be successful, they're actually more engaged. It is more efficient to teach the large group when everyone's getting what they need. Because in this one size fits all way, there are going to be a lot of people who are excluded. And at the very best, we can hope for compliance, which is they'll just sit there quietly and maybe they're not learning, but they're not attending. And so I do a lot of work with different school districts who do have high quality instructional materials like UFly. And my favorite game to play with them is called Explode the Verbs. So if you're going through a UFly lesson, there'll be a number of different verbs, like, of course, we're doing like some significant phonics work with decoding and phonemic awareness, but there's times where it's like discuss. And it could be something as simple as, do you want to discuss while you're taking a lap and you're walking around the play area just so you can get some movement, or do you want to discuss by sitting down? It could be as fun and simple as, do you want to discuss over here in a fishbowl where we have a small group discussing and everyone else is listening, and you can do hand movements to agree, to snap, to yes, I think so too, bring in some sign language. Or would you rather, if there are Post-its available, have a chalk talk discussion where you put an idea or an image and you try to make sense of them, right? And so it's all about thinking what really is the non-negotiable thing. But even what I find about elementary school teachers in general is they're the most creative people in the universe. And I have seen educators who will bring so much joy and so much fun to a high quality instructional lesson by simply saying, today, when you're doing your letter recognition, right? Do you want to write it on paper, or do you want to use a stick and scrape it outside near the playground? Or today, do you want to answer the questions like a human, or do you want to answer them like a robot? And you have some kids that are like, that is F, and it's like that joy, that like engagement, that play takes something that is very high quality, and it starts realizing, well, some kids might, not be really into this if it's the same thing every day. So I can like explode the verb discuss to have a couple of really engaging things. It's all about reading, if it's read, right? It's like, okay, so do you want to work with the teacher? I'm going to hold it up and you all do it. Or do you want to make your own copy of some of these letters cards and you can decide to work in small groups? So it's all depending on kind of the resources, but it's what are the verbs that you really want to capture and how do you explode those verbs into 3-4 options? And I like to ask kids. So when I'm in classrooms, even with 3, 4, 5-year-olds, I'll say, I was going to have you do it this way. Does anyone have any other ways? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to plug in, to think of something fabulous, to maybe let me know. Like, it's that kind of co-creation. So I am definitely an advocate for high quality instructional resources. That lesson that I showed you is from a program called Common Lit, which is free for educators all across the world. And that's how I exploded the verbs. It said read, I'm providing these options. It says annotate, oh, birdie, get down. I'm providing these options. So I would say yes, and right, taking these materials and saying to teachers, who are some of the kids who aren't accessing these materials yet? And let's think about how we can minimize that barrier without lowering expectations for the program.
Okay. Back to neurodiverse, author of a neurodiverse book, and because of it's going to be difficult to teach all the teachers, and they've been able to teach all the kids. So we're in the process of turning the book into a musical at the moment. And at the LDA conference next February in Las Vegas, we're looking at performing it and having kids from schools in Los Angeles to come to perform the thing, the musical. And we've got a professor in California and another person in New York, and we've got Global Lighthouse Studios in Colorado and everything all involved with doing this. So we could hopefully roll it out, and it'll give kids an understanding of a neurodiverse learner, but done in a fun way, we hope.
I am obsessed with the option of a musical version of a pedagogical text. I'm in. I want to see the video.
Would you do, as I say, with the training, would you do a presentation to them at some stage? I know you'll be busy, but at some point, if you get time.
Yeah, send me an email. I'll put it right in the chat.
Okay, thank you. That's me. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Very good presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you, Katie. Any more questions? I can see there's a lot going on. Anyone else? We have a few more minutes. Do we have any more questions? I had seen a hand up a few minutes ago. I didn't manage to get your name though. I'm so sorry.
I think it was James.
Katie, I do have a question for you, by the way. If I may go next. There's UDL, there's learning, and then there's assessment. So in our countries where the paradigm shift is in the process, it's not fully, set in, lack of a better word. Assessments are a huge challenge, not because we do not have the competencies as educationists in our countries, but because parents have a very, poor outlook towards the role of assessments in a child's life. They normally use this to define the intelligence of a child and to define, how should I say this, the social position of a child within peers. You know what I'm trying to say, and I don't want to say it directly because it's something that's very sensitive to all of us who come from those kind of places. UDL and assessment. How can you assess UDL in a way that is acceptable and that is effective for the child and their parents? There was a question earlier on, I can't see it anymore, about the IEP. And we've been having a lot of discussions about that of late. So if you could just kindly, briefly just explain to us how do you manage that?
I mean, there's so many layers of assessment. If you're talking about standardized assessments, they are not universally they are not universally designed. A part of my life's work is to help people realize that it is not a great indicator of potential. It cannot measure passion. It cannot measure strengths. It's very deficit based. It's looking for what is the need, what is the lagging skill. And so I think that if we're only ever looking at standardized assessments, we will never see kids for who they are and what they're capable of. So a big part of the work is just trying to advocate for truly standardized assessment systems. I'm going to put a blog in the chat of when we do have standardized assessments, what can we do to help students prepare for them? Because right now it is something that is often out of our scope of influence, where I can teach in a very accessible way all year, and then I am called to prepare students for an inaccessible test. And so I have a blog and a very short podcast. It's 10 minutes about what I did as a teacher, which was really to think about a standardized test as a genre of this is something that you're going to have to do. It is not the most important thing. It is some one way to show what you've learned. And so I think that if we're using it, should always, 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 always be triangulated with other forms of data. So in addition to looking at this is how the student is doing academically, I believe deeply in perception data. What are kids saying about themselves? Right? So asking kids like, do you feel like your needs are being met? Do you feel like you're being challenged? Do you feel like you belong? What do you want to do with this one big, beautiful life, right? Is school helping you work towards that? I think that student perception data is one of the most important things that we can look at. I think that family perception data, again, it has to be in ways that is universally designed because our families speak so many languages. And certainly we know that there are so many barriers to often when we're getting feedback from parents, we're getting feedback from the most privileged parents and not the communities that we serve. So school administrators really doing the work to reach out to their places of worship, to go to community centers, to have focus groups, to say, you know, what are you hoping your schools provide to students and what are you really proud of and what do you wish would change? So I always try to look at number one, yes, we have to look at student outcome data in terms of the standardized measures. Number two, we should be looking at perception data. What do families and kids and educators say about their experience? What is working really well? How do we know? And then we need instructional data, which is what's actually happening in learning environments. Because we want to see increased student autonomy. We want to see increased student collaboration. We want to see increased student engagement. And so that has to be measured alongside. Now, I think is what we recognize just in the field of education in general. If students and families are feeling more invested, more challenged, it's because instruction is shifting. And that will increase academic outcomes, even though those tests have many, many barriers of which I really feel like should be eliminated. And I wish that as countries across the world, we didn't compare the quality of education based on a single standardized measure, which is not accessible nor relevant to all students and is certainly not a good indicator of the path that we're going to take for a life well lived. There's no correlation to that.
Thank you, because I know that's been a lingering question for many, and I was wondering why no one has come forward with a question, but I'm glad you've answered it. We're here to answer questions, whether they ask or not. So I guess that's a wrap for us. Thank you so much, Katie, once again. Thank you, everyone, for your time and for your patience. The flow is back to you, Mr. President. Thank you so much for organizing
Thank
this.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again, Katie. I can't thank you enough. Again, we are the Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy. If you're interested in getting involved, and we work on advocacy projects for people with disabilities across the world. Inclusive education has become one of our key components at this moment. And Katie, I know you've, so I didn't get the email. So you can write to us at rotarywda@gmail.com. Katie, I know you've written, I think it's 16 books at this point. Is that right?
Well, number 17 came out on Tuesday. So
wow.
That's
very cool.
news.
And what is the name of that book?
That's called UDL Shifts. So it's all about like the practices that we want to shift so that we can find far more balance for educators and more engagement and outcomes for kids.
Oh my God. You have a whole bookcase of people can have a whole bookcase of your books on there. So, and they're all available also virtually. I mean, on what's the word I'm looking for? They can download them. Is they all downloadable?
Yep.
Okay.
Regular ebook, and I'm recording the audio of UDL Shift in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, and they're all on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay, very cool. And I think you put your email in the chat. Is that what you did? Okay. So people that want to reach out to you, they can do that way. We've had a full room here of people from around the world, globally. I was kind of taking notes on some of the people that we have here, and we want to thank them all for coming and have an interest in this topic. We will continue to run sessions like this. We're actually working on some ideas for ADHD training. We're looking at homeschooling training. We're looking at maybe doing some sign language training in some schools. And it goes on and on. We're actually going to have a workshop that's going to cover a lot of different training sessions in October. You'll be getting a word on that now. And everybody who registered here will also get a copy of the video from this event. So we'll be sending that out to you, and we'll keep you on our mailing list to our future events. But just to name some of the people here that are here, Katie, we got people, and I took notes here. So we have people from professionals from ministries of education, curriculum developers, examination bodies, parents from disability groups, policymakers, parents, teachers, administrators, educators in general, Rotarians, people from our club, both board members and members. And I want to thank you all for being here and all for taking an interest in this. And wow, I'm going to go back and look at this a couple more times, Katie, because it's that valuable. Sonia?
Yes, I also noticed I think we have about 15 members from vocational training centers. So that's a big thumbs up. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. That's a big thumbs up because that is where we want to head with our inclusive education area of focus in the club. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ken, once again.
Okay, much appreciated. Everybody have a good rest of your day. Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.